It is a privilege to find ourselves in the book of Proverbs. We're studying the Proverbs by theme. We've been talking about wealth and poverty, as well as, really, as we've gotten into the subject of poverty, we're now on the subject of laziness, which is so closely connected. Last week we talked about a few verses about laziness. Now I want to continue as we start in Proverbs number 15, and we'll start with verse 19. Keep in mind as we look at the Proverbs, we're talking about wisdom, and wisdom is defined as doing those things that please God. Since He's the Creator, He created you for a purpose. It's wise to please Him. It's unwise to displease Him. And to please Him, then, we start by looking at His commandments, and we say, how do we learn about the things God likes to see in us, the things that please God, from His commandments? And so wisdom is really taking the commandments, understanding behind them the desire of God, and then applying them to situations of our lives. Wealth and poverty is certainly something that we've already seen throughout the book of Proverbs. The wealth, the things that you have are given to you by God. The things that you possess, your wealth or your poverty, is in the hands of God. So let's see how we can please Him with it. One of the things that we're now on that certainly displeases God is when we are lazy, slothful. There's no good things said about the lazy in the proverb. There's no, well, I guess it's good if you're lazy because, no, there's none of those. Not a single positive thing said about laziness. We've looked at a couple already. Let's go to Proverbs 15, and we'll pick it up there. Proverbs 15 and verse 19, which says this: "The way of the slothful man is as an hedge of thorns, but the way of the righteous is made plain." Well, that's vivid, isn't it? A hedge of, hedge, that's bushes, right? Of thorns. So they're walking on a path away, and in the middle of the path, it's just all bushes and thorns. Have you ever tried to get through a thorn bush when if you ever just kind of walk through the woods, not on a path, you just kind of walk, and you come up to, you got to find a way around all those, because it is, you can pick through, it is ridiculous. You're going to come out with so many scrapes and bruises. Here, the whole path of the slothful is like a hedge of thorns. He's not going to get anywhere. He's going to be stuck. Why? Because he's lazy. He doesn't. A way that's filled with thorns means you don't get to your destination. That's what happens to the lazy person. He doesn't go anywhere. He starts on the path and stays right where he started. But the way of the righteous is made plain. That word "made plain" is the word highway. It's like this well-trodden, well-paved, easy to walk down. It's a highway. It's made plain. It's easy in the sense that you're going to get from point A to point B. You're going to accomplish the purpose the righteous person is, where the lazy person is not. It's interesting that the laziness here is contrasted with righteousness, right? Laziness, the opposite of righteousness. Doing what is right is the opposite of lazy, right? Now, the Bible doesn't actually say, in the commandments, the law of God doesn't say, "Thou shalt not be lazy." But it does speak about property ownership, about not being a thief. It talks about all the things that lead you to the conclusion that you shouldn't be lazy. You should go out and work, build your own house, plow your own field, those sort of things. Be diligent. So Proverbs 15 verse 19 gives us that introduction into our study today. The way of the slothful man is as a hedge of thorns, but the way of the righteous is made plain. Let's go to the next one in chapter 18. And these are fascinating. I would love to hear your take on some of these before I give you my study, because I'm hoping that you make some of the mistakes that I make, and it'll make me feel better, okay? Some of these are really hard to grasp because we use a Bible that is worded with Old English wording, right? And so some of these can be very difficult to grab a hold of. So let's go to Proverbs 18, verse 9. This one's not too difficult. He also that is slothful in his work is brother to him that is a great waster. What's interesting here, not only is, so he that is slothful in his work, meaning he's working, but he's working slothfully, he's working lazily, he's slack, right? He's brother to him that goes out and actually wastes or actually destroys things. He's equating going to work but working lazily is exactly the same. You are equal to the person who goes out and actively destroys. Active destruction is equal to inactive laziness. Because what happens to things that you don't keep up, that you aren't diligent about? They get destroyed. So you couldn't do a better job of destroying it if you had actually gone out and actively tried to destroy it. The lazy person is being told. You know? I mean, look at some... This is a really simple example, right? I like to watch those little things on social media where the guy goes and he goes to a yard that's like all overgrown with grass and he mows it and, you know, cuts it down. You get all this like, oh, that's really satisfying seeing what before and the after when he mows all the grass. But then I start thinking, I'm like, well, but the person who he's mowing for is obviously not mowing that lawn. So a year from now is going to look exactly the same as it was before. Because that's what happens when you're lazy. You don't have to work at destroying things. Things just destroy themselves. You haven't been keeping them up, right? That's interesting. Let's go one chapter over to chapter 19, verse 24. Now, if you're using a different version, then you're cheating. Okay, don't raise your hand at first because you'll give it away. All right. Verse 24, a slothful man hideth his hand in his bosom and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. What do you think that means?
I like to think of this Napoleon.
Hideth his hand in his bosom. I was racking my brain about this. I'm thinking, why is he taking his hand, putting it in his belly, and then putting it up to his mouth? I mean, ugh. What is he doing? Is there some sort of practice that I'm missing? Well, the word that's translated bosom is a word that means a dish or a bowl. It can be used to talk about a bosom. You know, if you have like, I suppose if you have a belly that's like a bowl, you know, it could be figurative of a belly or a bosom, but it's actually speaking about a dish. So remember, in their times, they would take a piece of bread, they would reach forward and dip it in the dish at the center of the table, and then they would bring it back and eat the bread, right? This is saying the slothful man, he's so lazy that he doesn't want to do the work of bringing the bread back from the dish and putting it in his mouth. It's sort of like a Chinese proverb, I think it's a Chinese proverb I read, that said something like, the lazy man will die of hunger under the date tree. He won't even go and grab the food and put it in his mouth. He's so lazy. Isn't that what we are when we're lazy? Let's not talk about other people. Let's talk about us. When we're lazy, isn't that what we're doing? We're just saying, I don't want to do the basic things I need to live, even though I could easily do them. I'm just lazy, right? Any other thoughts about that particular proverb? Changes things when you change to a different, when you understand the wording here. The next one is very much that way as well. Turn with me to Proverbs 21. I'm sorry, was I on 19 or was I? Yes. Yeah, 21. Proverbs 21, verse 25 and 26. The desire of the slothful killeth him, for his hands refuse to labor. He coveteth greedily all the day long, but the righteous giveth and spareth not. This one's not as difficult to grasp, but it does take a little bit of thought. What are your thoughts just initially? Yes. The desire of the slothful killeth him, for his hands refuse to labor. He coveteth greedily all the day long, but the righteous giveth and spareth not.
He's so slothful that he has all these ambitions or these desires, but yet he's so lazy he won't even lift a finger to try to get any of it.
Yeah.
And then, but then a righteous person goes out, but then there's always more that they can give because they're always doing stuff.
Yeah, that's good. They can give away because they've got more than enough because they're being righteous. Here's the thing that took me a little bit in my study trying to ponder on this. The desire of the slothful killeth him. How does the desire, something that somebody wants, of a lazy person, how does his desire kill him? He's going to die, but it says, for his hands refuse to labor. So I think it's the desire, his desires, the things that he wants things just like the rest of us, but he's not willing to work for it. So I think then the implication is he's not only, if he doesn't work, he will die, sure, but I think he's going to try to go get what he wants without working. What is he going to do to get? He's going to steal. He's going to try to manipulate, steal, get people to give him stuff. Whatever he does is going to lead him down a path of unrighteousness, which is why he's the opposite of the righteous. The righteous is the person who's able to give to others. Instead of saying, well, I want to go out and work so I can meet my needs and get all the things I want. That's at least better than the lazy person. But how about we be righteous with what God has given us so that we're able to give to others? So it's not really all about ourselves, right? But the lazy person, he's so filled with the things that he wants, but also unwilling to do work to get them. He wants, the plasma screen TV, 85 inches, but he doesn't want to have to go to work every day to earn the money. So what is he going to do? Well, he's got to find a government program, or he's got to find, he's got to find some way to get it. And if all else fails, he's going to steal it. And what is that going to end with? Well, it's going to end with his death. It's going to kill him. It's actually going to ruin him because he has all these desires that he's not willing to work to accomplish. He coveteth greedily. Verse 26, greedily. He's looking for things for himself, which is why he's not willing to work, because I don't want to work, and it's all about me. But the righteous gives, he giveth, and spareth not, because he didn't earn it for himself. He earned it so he would be able to give, right? That was kind of the point. Two different ideas. Right across the page on chapter 22, verse 13, there's another one. This one's interesting. And I had to read some commentaries on this one before I'm like, oh, it's so simple. That makes sense. But verse 13 of Proverbs 22, the slothful man says, there is a lion without, I shall be slain in the streets. That's the whole proverb. You kind of think, well, that's half a proverb. Where's the rest, right? What is it saying? What do you think?
Is using a lion as an excuse.
Excuse. How did you know that? And that took me forever to figure that out. That's what it's saying. He's saying, oh, I can't go out and work. What if a lion shows up? There could be a lion out there. I heard that maybe there might be a lion passing this way out in the streets. I can't go out and work. He's coming up with any excuse not to work. If anybody here has ever been a boss at a place of employment, you know. Oh, I can't come in. I can't come into work. There's a tree down on my road. You go and you see it's like, a fern that's falling. I can't work today. They're looking for an excuse. And here Solomon is saying, all right, you're always going to find some excuse. Oh, what if a lion shows up and eats me? I can't go work in the field. Well, there's always going to be some excuses, but you've got to live your life, and you've got to go out and work, and you've got to be diligent, right? Next, the same chapter, verse. Oh, well, actually, let's skip that. We'll come back to this chapter in a moment because we're studying laziness. We'll study diligence in just a minute. The opposite of that. Let's go to chapter 26. Verse 13. Now this is interesting because we've already found some of the answers to this one. Look at how here we have a repeating of Solomon's Proverbs, only grouping them together this time. Verse 13. The slothful man saith, there is a lion in the way, a lion in the streets. Oh, okay, that's the same one we just heard, right? Verse 14, as the door turneth upon his hinges, so doth the slothful on his bed. Oh, there's a new one. We haven't looked at that one yet. Verse 15, the slothful hideth his hand in his bosom, same word, that means dish. It grieveth him to bring it again to his mouth. And then 16, a new one, the sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason. Okay, so now we have a grouping of Solomon's Proverbs about lazy people, all in 4 verses. We already looked at the first one. The slothful man says there's a lion in the street. Let's look at verse 14. As the door turneth upon his hinges, so doth the slothful upon his bed. Anyone want to offer an interpretation? Yes?
He just turned over. Just turned over to bed.
He just turned over?
Yeah, he's not going to get up.
Yeah.
The door's connected to the door frame.
The door is on a frame.
Yeah.
It turns back and forth. It doesn't get anywhere.
Yeah.
The door moves a lot, but it never goes anywhere. It stays right where it is. They lay in the bed. They toss and turn. They come up with excuses. And if they had put as much effort into their work as they had into their excuses and their tossing and turning, they would have at least gotten somewhere. Right? They would have done something, accomplished something. But they're so worried about work that they work so hard not to work. Right? Okay, let's do verse 16 then. 15s are repeating, but in the same context. He doesn't want to even bring the food. It's so hard to feed myself. Verse 16. The sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason. Remember that wiser in conceit in that phrase refers to being wiser in your own estimation, in your own eyes. You think yourself to be wise, right? So the sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men that actually can render a reason. I mean, he thinks he's pretty smart. Now, it would make sense for him to say the fool is wiser in his own eyes. The fool thinks himself to be pretty smart, smarter than 7 other men who actually are smart. He thinks he's smart. But the sluggard, he's now equating the sluggard with the fool. And isn't this just practically and obviously true? If you have ever tried to do a job that really takes some amount of expertise, and you think, oh, but I don't have to go work and learn all the things I need to learn. I can do this. You might talk to 7 people who walk by and say, you're not doing that right. Nah, but this is easier. And then later on, you're like, man, I wish I had listened to one of those 7 people that told me I shouldn't have done it this way. This was not the way to do it. It would have been more work up front, but it would have saved me a lot of work later if I just hadn't been lazy and did the work to learn it. The sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 men who actually have the answer to the problem. Well, now let's contrast that with the diligent. I have 3 verses here on the diligent. We'll close with these 3. Back in chapter 22, verse 29. Here's another one where the Old English makes it difficult for us. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men. What's your initial thoughts on that?
Probably that he's well respected, so therefore he's going to be seen highly in front of people who actually matter, not, riffraff in the streets.
Okay. I think that's the same. That's the vein that we're in. You're in the right vein there. So essentially, the word mean makes it a little confusing here because we have the word mean for us means, well, it's the interpretation of something, or it's like, oh, he's angry, he's nasty, he's mean to somebody, you know. That's not what the word mean means in the Old English. It could mean that. It also means, in Old English, it means unknown or obscure, unimportant people, lowly people. So a man who's diligent in his business, he stands before or he serves the king. He does not have to serve lowly, obscure, unimportant men. He gets a good job. He's hired by the best of the people because they're looking for diligent people. The king is writing this, King Solomon. He's like, I'm looking for someone who's diligent in his business. That's the type of people I hire. And remember, Solomon is a manager, right? He runs a business, if you will. I mean, he's the king, so he's knows what it's like to be a boss. And from the perspective of a boss, he's telling the people of Israel, listen, if you're diligent, you're going to have a good job with a good master, you're going to have an important position. But otherwise, you're going to end up being the servant of the most lowly. You're going to be the servant of the most lowly person in town. That's going to be your job because you're not diligent. You don't work hard with it. Proverbs 24 gives us another one. Verse 27. Prepare thy work without, and make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thine house. This is a thinker. What's your thoughts on this? Let me read it one more time. Prepare thy work without, and make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thine house. Yes?
Don't put the cart before the horse.
Yes.
Or the horse before the cart, whichever way it goes. Mm-hmm. That make sure you have a job that you can support your family, your housing, and that kind of thing before you. So don't build your house first and then go look for a job to pay.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's not what I'm grabbing exactly, but it's real close to what I'm grabbing. I think that's right along the lines, if not spot on. Did someone else have something? I thought. Don't let me point at you if you didn't have your hand up, Alyssa.
Does it mean take care of things that are of higher priority first?
Oh.
The field is what is going to give you food.
It's definitely about getting things in order. There's no doubt about that, and you both have touched on that. As I've looked at the wording used here, I've come to the conclusion, and read several commentaries on it, that it seems to be talking about preparing a field to build a house on it, right? You're building the house. Instead of just going and building the house, you've got to go and dig in the ground. You've got to set in the foundation. You've got to all that. You got to level the field. If it's not level, you got to do what you got to do to prepare the field, prepare for the work of building the house, and then you build the house. If you just say, well, I'm just going to build a house, you're doing it as lazily as possible. You're not doing the preparation work. And here it seems to be saying, if you're going to do work well, you're going to prepare for the work before you do the work. And I could just tell you, as not a very handy person, when I say, oh, I can do that, I say, Alyssa, oh, no problem, I can get that done. And then I set aside a time when I'm going to get it done, and I get right in the middle of the job. Maybe I'm taking apart something in my car, and then I'm like, oh, I need this tool for this, and I haven't prepared for that. And now I've got to go run to the store. I got to get in the other car. Well, this car's all laying in pieces. I'm going to go run to the store and get the tool, come back and realize I need another tool in addition to that tool, then go back out. And the next thing you know, I'm like, man, this would have been a lot easier if I just prepared ahead of time, right? If I just knew what I was getting into. And I think that's the idea here. It's you don't just go build a house. You don't just throw a house together on a piece of land. You prepare. You prepare the land. You level it. You dig your foundation, all that kind of stuff. In the same way, a wise worker is going to go out and prepare to do the work. We kind of did that today, didn't we? With the work we're going to do with the VBS. We took a little bit of wisdom and we prepared a little bit for VBS. And we're going to have a lot more preparation to do, I'm sure, between now and then. But we're taking time we don't just go out and do it. We prepare for it. And I think that's important. One more, and we'll close with this. Proverbs 27, verses 23 through 27. And this one's a little bit more straightforward. It says this, Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds. For riches are not forever, and doth the crown endure to every generation? The hay appeareth, and the tender grass showeth itself, and herbs of the mountain are gathered. The lambs are for thy clothing, and the goats are the price of the field. And thou shalt have goats' milk enough for thy food, for the food of thy household, and for the maintenance of thy maidens. So he says, be diligent to know the state of your flocks. This is not to earn flocks. If you have them, now you need to be diligent to maintain them, right? Make sure you know what's going on with that flock. If there's a disease, you separate, it doesn't spread. You are managing. You are doing the work of making sure that you preserve what God has given you, taking care of the things God has given you diligently. So now, taking what God has given you and diligently caring for that thing. Know the state of your flocks and look well to thy herds, for riches are not forever. Like these things don't just, once you get them, they just continue on without any maintenance. Everything that, especially, and it was even more obvious to them, right? We have bank accounts, and typically we just say, the money's just going to stay in the bank account or whatever. But even that goes away, right? You have regular bills, and if you aren't putting stuff in, eventually it runs out, right? It doesn't just stay there forever. But especially when your currency, a lot of times their currency was just trading animals and trading actual physical things. And so it was a little bit more obvious to them that if I don't go out and take care of this flock and maintain it, just because I have the flock, doesn't mean I'll still have the flock next year if I don't do anything over the next year, right? Just because I have the field and it has hay in it doesn't mean I'll still have hay next year if I don't do anything to maintain and keep this field plowed. Riches are not forever. They don't just continue. The crown doesn't continue to every generation. He's saying, look, I'm the king. Remember, Solomon's talking to his son. You're going to be the king after me, but there's no guarantee that you're going to keep it or that your son's going to be king. We don't know. Eventually someone's going to come and take the crown. Actually, Solomon is speaking to his son who has a promise that eventually the Messiah comes and the crown does endure through all generations, through the lineage of David. But Solomon it's kind of like a prophecy here, because Solomon's own son Rehoboam, 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel are going to rebel against Rehoboam. They're going to go to the north and steal that part of the crown from Rehoboam. It's pretty amazing how Solomon recognizes this problem. Rehoboam, if you're not careful, you're going to lose the crown. You got to maintain this stuff. You got to be careful with it. The hay appeareth, the tender grass showeth itself, and the herbs of the mountain are gathered. The lambs are for thy clothing, and the goats are the price of the field. Look, you don't get clothes without lambs for wool. How are you going to... All this stuff comes from the work. Tie what you have, the things that you need, to the work that you're doing, and understand that this work is something I need to do. I've got to do this. And you'll probably have a better attitude about the work you do when you say, I can see the results. That's one of the reasons why it's so easy to be a pastor. Not like there's not hard things to do, but when I'm doing hard things, it's easy because it's easy to see what I'm focusing on, right? The results, and to see God working and all that. It's very, very easy to tie the things that I do directly into the plan of God and all that. It's a lot harder when you're going into a secular job, sitting around a bunch of sinners and people that are saying things and bothering you, and you're just like, Rah! And you got to tie that into what God is doing, how God is providing for you, how you're able to serve the Lord because in a way that you wouldn't be if you didn't have the job. It's a lot harder to draw those lines, but when you do, it gives you a much better attitude about going out and doing the work you've got to do. So, then verse 27, thou shalt have, when you are diligent, thou shalt have goat's milk enough. Look at that, I love that word. Enough for what? There's three things. For thy food, you'll have enough to eat. For the food of your household, okay, so your family will have enough to eat. and for the maintenance of thy maidens. In this case, it's talking about a person who has flocks and herds and fields, so he's got to have people who are working them, servants, maid servants and men servants. And so he's saying, you're going to be able to pay your employees. If you're managing well, you're going to be able to feed yourself and feed your house. Well, what about more than that? Well, you probably want to have something to lay aside to give to your children when you die, sure. And then the rest is to give to other people who are in genuine need, right? It's not all about just, pleasing myself. But if you're diligent, you'll have at least be able to meet your obligations, is what's being said. Go be diligent and your obligations will be met. Don't be diligent and you won't have that benefit. Any last thoughts before we close? All right, next week we move on to the neediness of the poor and how do we meet the need of the poor? How do we give to the poor, especially if they're lazy? Or do we just give them money and encourage them to be more lazy and ask for more money from other people? What is our response to the poor, those of us who are not as poor as they are? And that's what we'll talk about next week as the Lord allows us to. Father in heaven, we thank you for your goodness and your love. Thank you for giving us this wonderful book of wisdom, and thank you for all the wisdom that you've given us in it. Pray that you bless as we go from here. Help us to put it in practice in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.